Hello and welcome to Catholic Scandinavia on EWTN. In this new series, we're travelling across the stunning Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden and Denmark in Northern Europe, bringing you the beauty of the countries and the Catholic faith there. Coming up in this third episode, we learn about Saint Olav, the patron saint of Norway, and hear about the beautiful Saint Olav's Way that so many pilgrims walk each year.
There are days with sunshine, there are days with rain, there are steep hills, there are beautiful scenery. If you just get focused on the way too much, you might miss it, but if you look up, you see the beauty. If you only look up, you might stumble. There's so many wonderful images.
In Sweden, we visit the cathedral in Stockholm, which has a hidden shrine.
It's full of relics from Hieronymus, from Teresa of Avila, and actually from saints that are more or less forgotten now.
And in Denmark, we hear one woman's inspirational conversion story.
You learn to love him because you come to know him. You cannot love someone you don't know.
This is Catholic Scandinavia on EWTN. First, we're starting in Norway at St. Olav's Cathedral in Oslo, named after the country's patron saint. And this parish here was set up in 1843, making it the first parish to be established after the Reformation in Norway.
Well, it started with a small group of Catholics in Oslo who wanted to have a parish. It was forbidden after the Reformation to practice Catholic faith. And a group of 60 Catholics in Oslo wrote to the king in Sweden and asked for permission to open up a parish, and they got the permission in 1843. Those 60 people had one thing in common except being Catholics, and that was that none of them were Norwegian.
The cathedral is home to the largest known relic of Saint Olav, known as the Golden Glove.
We don't know the exact history of how it ended up here, but it's presumed that it was in Nidarosdomen in Trondheim in the Middle Ages, and that it might have been taken to Denmark when the king made himself head of the church. It ended up in a museum in Copenhagen, and after this church had been built, the then Queen of Norway and Sweden, she was Catholic, Queen Josephine, and she wrote to the Danish king and asked to have the arm brought back to the now newly built Sankt Olav church in Oslo. The king wanted to keep the gilded arm, so the reliquary, but we could have that old bone inside. He didn't care about the old bone, and that is what we wanted. So the hand is like this, like the priest giving blessing. And that is what we use it for here now on the 29th of July. After the Mass, we have a procession with the relic, and then we give a blessing with the arm at the end or after the Mass.
Saint Olav was born Olav Hallason II in 995. He grew up as a Viking, and it was as a young man that he met Christians for the first time. After becoming baptized, he returned to Norway with two projects in mind.
One was to gather the whole of the country under one king, him, and also to complete making Norway a Christian nation. There were already many Christians here, but also a lot of resistance against the faith. He introduced Christian laws to the country, laws built on gospel values, like it was permitted to place newly born babies out into the forest if they weren't wanted. They could be placed there to die. That is now forbidden because life is sacred from the beginning. Marriage was invalid if it was not done freely of both parties, and so on. So new laws shaped on the gospel, and that changed the culture in the whole country.
You could say that Saint Olav was not the kind of saint you might have imagined. When he ascended to the throne in Norway, he went on a mission to convert the nation to Christianity. However, it was a strong pagan country, and King Olav forced many to convert through violence and brutality. This made him a divisive figure, and he had enemies. In 1029, Olav was overturned as king and driven into exile. It is said he ended up in a region of Sweden where he continued to baptize people. He was killed in 1030 after trying to regain control of Norway, and while he was neither popular nor considered especially holy during his lifetime, Olav was soon revered after death, owing to reports of miracles occurring at his tomb. He was canonized in 1031.
Sankt Olav has kind of been in the shadow for many years now. Most people in this country have a very poor understanding of him. He's more known for his brutality than being a saint. Many people are puzzled why this brutal man could become a saint. For me, it gives hope. I mean, if he could become a saint, then it's kind of, that's where we're all heading, hopefully. That is not just kind of this image we have in our minds of these perfect people, but he is a real man who took some real steps in his life to become a saint. And you can see how the gospel grew in him and in this country through him. That more and more young people notice him. Like my servers here in the cathedral. More and more people are close to him now. So I think devotion to him will increase in the years to come.
In Norway, there is also a very popular pilgrimage walk called St. Olav's Way, and people come from near and far to walk in the steps of their patron saint.
For me, it's a very good experience, just to walk, nothing else, just to walk, to go and to feel as a pilgrim.
Father Hubert Ueser is a member of the Salvatorian order and is 19 days into his pilgrimage, walking the beautiful Gudsbrandalen path, which spans 400 miles from the capital of Oslo to Norway's third largest city, Trondheim. The route is the longest pilgrim path in the country and was the main road to Trondheim during the Middle Ages.
I had a very hard job the last years, and so I said I have to do something for me, for myself, and I wanted to go for me alone.
For Father Hubert, this pilgrimage gets him moving, but more importantly, it helps him to set priorities and understand what is truly important in life.
Good to get aware what are the fountains of your life? What are the things who are really important? This was for me a very good experience.
Toralf Nelas is responsible for the upkeep of the trails in the Trondheim region, making sure the pilgrims don't get lost on their way into the city. Day to day, he greets pilgrims, communicates with his colleagues on the paths, and organises restoration work of St. Olav's Way.
We call it the St. Olav's Way because of it is the roads that led the pilgrims to the shrine or the place of St. Olav. They are the old main roads from before we had cars and had traffic transport methods along except horse and walking. So they are the historical places where people went from place to place. That is kind of beautiful, I think.
To understand why these trails are here, we have to go back to 1030, when St. Olav was killed 100 kilometers outside of Trondheim. After his death, his remains were transported to Trondheim and laid to rest in St. Clement's Church. Shortly after, he was sanctified, and pilgrims started to flock to the region in search of healing powers that are thought to be connected to his place of rest.
Because of all the miracles happening in and around St. Olav and his cathedral, it's begun to be a lot of pilgrims arriving here.
These pilgrims started to arrive in the 1970s, but they did not have any infrastructure or organisation in place to care for them. It was not until the 90s that work began on the Pilgrim Trail, and in 1997 they officially opened St. Olav's Way.
Well, I think the most important or amazing thing about the Pilgrim's Way here up to Nidaros is that it has so long history, back to like 1100, where people have been walking for ages the same way we are walking today.
Here at the Pilgrimage Centre in Trondheim, Ingeborg Colin Hogseth is the general manager, taking care of all the visitors that pass through and helping them decide what trails best fit their needs.
You wake up in the morning, depending on if you sleep in a tent or on a hostel, and you eat your breakfast and then you start walking. And you can walk alone for quite some time, depending also on what path you choose. And then you will meet other pilgrims on the way, and you can choose if you want to stop and have a chat or if you just want to continue by yourself. Path from Oslo to Trondheim, you have the possibility to not have a tent with you at all, so you can only sleep on hostels. Other paths, you will need to have a tent because it's not equipped enough. We don't have hostels all the ways. Sleep wherever you want, really, except from inside the city centers.
There are 9 different trails pilgrims can take, which all lead to Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim, where a stone marks the end of St. Olav's Way.
That's a very special place for many people when a month of walking have resulted in you standing right here at this, next to this stone.
Hello. Welcome. How are you? Are you relieved to be here?
When pilgrims reach the end of the pilgrimage at St. Olav's Cathedral, they are encouraged to visit the neighbouring pilgrimage centre. Here they receive stamps in their pilgrimage passport.
Congratulations.
Marking where they have been, receiving a certificate of completion and placing a pin on the map marking what part of the world they came from. Today, Father Hubert received stamps in his pilgrimage passport, marking his completion of the pilgrimage walk.
The mountains were for me really a challenge, but on the other side, this was the really great experience to do this.
When you go out on a pilgrimage, you just take a break from your ordinary life and start walking.
Doing the St. Olav pilgrimage will let you experience Norway in a whole different way, meeting really nice people and beautiful scenery.
Meeting a lot of holy places along the way. You will cross mountains, you will go through valleys, you will enter communities and exit them in a very beautiful way.
You meet good weather, you meet bad weather, you meet sore feet, and you have good days and bad days. So it's like the whole pilgrimage, it's more like a picture of a life.
I think it will give you an experience for life, and I really hope even more people will experience this.
You're watching Catholic Scandinavia on EWTN. There are several Catholic churches spread throughout Stockholm, the capital, with the main church being St. Erik's Cathedral.
At the moment, we are standing in the Catholic Cathedral of Stockholm. We have this Christ of the Sacred Heart, and to the left, of course, Our Lady, Mary, the crowned Mary, and there is a devotion on all these altars. After every Mass, there are people here. And this is the old part. It was inaugurated, consecrated 1892. Before that, it was just a Catholic school here in a house from 17th century.
The building was originally a large house of wealthy families who came from abroad, and at some point it was donated to the church.
This was not cathedral by then because we had no bishop. We had the apostolic vicar. We had a bishop 1954, and then this church became cathedral.
It's not your typical cathedral. One might say it's modest.
So when a bishop came here from Germany during 1980s, he was shown his cathedral, and he came in here and he looked around and he said, "Nice chapel, now I want to see the cathedral." So then the priest had to tell him, this is your cathedral.
Also, to the side of the church is a small, beautifully decorated shrine dedicated to Our Lady of Stockholm.
We are now standing in front of Our Lady of Stockholm, and the altar is from Altomünster in Germany. It was a Saint Bridget convent who donated the altar. It's full of relics from Hieronymus, from Teresa of Avila, and actually from saints that are more or less forgotten now.
And in the middle there is an icon of Our Lady of Kazan, a holy icon from the Russian Orthodox Church, which represents the Virgin Mary as protector of the Russian city of Kazan, and also the holy protectress of all Russia. It was at the beginning of the 1980s that the dean of this cathedral, Monsignor Johannes Koch, had a vision. He was struck by the fact that in 1917, Lenin had spent one day in Stockholm before going to Russia to start his godless revolution. This icon at the time was held in Fatima, and Monsignor Koch was exhausting all his contacts, trying to get the icon returned to Moscow, where he knew it would see the end of atheism in Russia. He also suggested the icon should pass through Stockholm on its way to liberating Russia, but his efforts failed. However, after much searching, Monsignor Koch indeed found an icon of Our Lady of Kazan in Bavaria. It was in private hands and for sale. The history of this icon is unknown, but after the takeover of Russia by the communists in 1917, many objects belonging to the church were destroyed or sold in the West. The icon was brought and moved here to Stockholm, where it has been ever since. It was consecrated in 1984 and in 1988 devoted to Sweden. In July of 1989, Saint Pope John Paul II visited Sweden and prayed to Our Lady of Stockholm. In November of the same year, the wall fell between East and West Berlin. Later surveys discovered that this might be one of the oldest Kazan icons in the world, older than the one that was originally kept in Fatima.
We are now in the new part of the Catholic Cathedral in Stockholm. It was built 1983 because the old part wasn't room enough for all these Catholics. They had to have the first Holy Communion outside of the church, actually. So this is a modern part combined with an old part. You also see windows here, and some of them, 4 of them, are from the Malmö church, the old church in Malmö that is not anymore. And you also see some modern windows here. So there is a mixture of old and new.
Under the altar, there are the relics of Saint Eric, the 12th century king who was martyred and became the patron saint of Stockholm. On Sundays, the cathedral celebrates Mass in Italian, Latin, Swedish, Croatian, Spanish and Polish, which truly represents the international population of the city of Stockholm. You're watching Catholic Scandinavia on EWTN. This is Anna Emdenberg, a woman who has had a remarkable journey of faith. We caught up with her in Copenhagen in Denmark, but Anna grew up with her family in a rural area in the middle of Sweden.
It was a very happy childhood. I had a very happy childhood. Lots of freedom. I was out very much in nature and yes, I had a good home.
Her family baptized her, but religion was more cultural and not practiced. Growing up, Anna believed she had everything she could want in life, so God was never really something that crossed her mind.
I had good parents, I had a good home, I had a very good school, I had good friends. I didn't need any god.
She studied abroad in Spain and went on to have a successful career.
Very typical, average Swedish, I would say.
But in 1981, her father sadly passed away at the young age of 51.
And I, at the same time, started to work within computer business.
Anna and her boss at the software company would often have dinner together, but one day, out of the blue, he asked her to marry him. The proposal came as a shock to Anna, as the pair were not a couple and she was not in love.
I didn't really believe in love. I mean, my parents really loved each other and respected, and I saw that daily in my home. So I thought that men were like my father, and I very fast discovered they were not, and that I was supposed to have the same sort of life as my parents had, and I didn't.
Anna was having different experiences of life to that of her parents, and she had lost faith in love.
So it was the sort of convenience, and that is quite common as well, I would say.
Now married and with 2 kids, she gave up her job to be a housewife while her husband continued to run his software business.
I had everything, and I had nothing.
Feeling like a huge part of her life was empty, she found herself looking for help.
So I asked, actually, as I did not believe in God, my dead father. I sort of said, please, Father, help me. And he did, but it wasn't my father who came, it was God.
Anna felt the presence of God, and despite facing problems in her personal life, she continued to search for the truth. But it was when she was placed in a hospital that she thought more about her newly found faith. It was here Anna rediscovered love and asked God to let her do His will.
He gave me this inner urge to come to a monastery, to go to a monastery. And I went to Montserrat in Spain, because that was the only one I knew.
As she sat inside a Catholic church for the first time in her life, she knew that she wanted to learn more about the faith, and she ended up in Valencia, where she was taken in by a priest who lived next to a Dominican monastery.
I worked in Caritas with homeless people during daytime, went to Vesper and prayed, and I learned my faith. In Sweden, you're not supposed to be open about your faith, and I am. And if you're open with your faith, you're not supposed to be Catholic, because we're a minority, and I am. So it has been quite hard. You learn to love Him because you come to know Him. You cannot love someone you don't know. And He shows Himself in that you serve others.
Anna now carries out God's work by dedicating her life to helping the elderly and sick people.
He's given me so much, something that I would not choose myself. When He chooses for you, then His choice is what He knows that you need, not what you want.
Despite her tough life, she thanks God for giving her joy when she needed it the most.
I mean, the life that I had before was exterior, because I found happiness in shopping and looking nice and being presentable and having a good status in society and having all that. But this is different because it comes from inside of you. God loves us. This is why He gave His life. I mean, when you come to know Him, and you know He did that because He knows us, and we come to know ourselves, you come to know yourself, and you know you couldn't have been doing this without Him.
That's it for this episode of Catholic Scandinavia, but coming up in the next episode, we sit down with His Eminence Cardinal Anders Arborelius in Stockholm, Sweden, to hear about how he converted from Lutheranism after hearing the call.
But I quite early had a kind of longing for, well, to give myself to God.
In Uppsala, Sweden, we meet a woman who had a tough upbringing and thought she would never need God in her life.
There was something missing, there was something that I always thought I was kind of an outcast, always.
In Bergen, Norway, we see how the church is teaching Norwegian and English to immigrants and refugees.
I mean, we can know other culture and we can talk with them.
And we meet a visualization engineer who wanted something more out of life.
Start looking for what is my calling? What does God want me to do?
See you next time on Catholic Scandinavia.
Oh